everyone. In this last part of the series, we're going to talk about citations and editing. So by now you hopefully have a strong draft that evolved from a strong outline. Now we'll talk about how to make sure that you are properly citing your sources as well as how to edit your work. With citations, I'm going to be using slides from a presentation called Avoiding Plagiarism by Jennifer Gonzalez from Cult of Pedagogy. Just don't want to ironically end up plagiarizing. So these slides to follow are from her, adapted from her full presentation on MLA style. There are two different ways that you need to give credit to your sources while you are writing your paper in MLA style. The first one we're going to talk about is your works cited page that comes at the very end. For you, this will be very easy because it will just be the entries that you have at the beginning of each annotated bibliography entry. So you should already have your citations done. We're just going to be taking a look at how in general they are formatted so that you can double check that you have them set up correctly. In each entry, you will start with the author's name. So that should be the thing that comes first. Last name, then first name, followed by a period. If there is no attributable author for the source that you're talking about, you'll move on to the next piece. Then we have the title, right? That usually comes in italics if it is a book. We'll talk a little bit later about what to do if it's not a book. Then you have the name of the publisher, followed by a comma, and then the year it was published, followed by a period. And then what you can do is be very specific in your works cited page about what page number you referenced or page numbers if you are talking about a range. However, it's not necessary. It will be necessary in our next step later on, not so much here. So that is what your one entry for your works cited would look like. This is roughly what your entries on your annotated bibliography you already have done should look like. There are some exceptions that have to do with containers. So if you have something and it is part of a larger collection of material, we will be formatting it a little bit differently. So that first example was easy because we were citing an entire book. It's a little bit different when you are talking about a chapter from a book, when you're talking about an article. Probably won't come up as much in this assignment, but same thing goes for short stories or poems. So we talk about things in terms of containers and sources. So a book is the overall container. A chapter is the source. You could have a website as a container, right? It contains everything within that website, whereas your source might just be one article from that website. It's important to keep in mind that the container, the big piece, the entire work, will be written in italics in MLA style. But if you're just referring to something smaller inside that container, it will be in quotation marks, not in italics. So for example, if we are talking about just this one article title here, notice that we have it formatted the same as the author, not in italics, not bold, not underlined, nothing, and then just in quotation marks. My guess is that this is how most of your sources should look for this assignment, since I'm guessing that most of your sources are articles from journals or articles from different websites. My guess is that you did not read 8 different books. You did not need to. So just keep an eye out. Make sure that your formatting is correct here. Then you would add where that shorter piece comes from. So where does this smaller piece of information come from? That container, again, will be in italics. And then the rest continues, right? We have the date. We have, if necessary, the full URL. Most of this is probably familiar to you already, but just as a reminder. It's important to notice, just like with the annotated bibliography, that your works cited page should be in alphabetical order based on the first letter of your entry. So in this case, because we had authors for each source, we are going by the last name of the author alphabetically. If, however, we didn't have the author, we would go based off of the next piece, which should be the title, excluding words like the or a. So if we didn't have the author's name here, we didn't know, first of all, we would double check that we know it's a reputable source, even though there's no author attributed to it. And then we would alphabetize this based on the letter G, because that is our first significant word in the title, excluding the. The other thing to notice for your works cited is to make sure that if your entry goes beyond your first line, that you have what's called a hanging indent. That's where it's about a 1/2 inch of space moving in. On Canvas, I have the MLA style guide here that you can see small in the video, and so this will help remind you of everything that we just talked about as well. The second way that you need to refer to your sources and give them credit is through in-text citations. This is where you give credit to the source within the text of your own writing. So your works cited page is there at the end so that anybody who wants to follow up on research can go read those sources themselves. Your in-text citations come throughout your paper to help people know where you got which pieces of information. So you can do this pretty informally, where you can just say, according to writer Jason Morey, right? And then give your information. So you can just refer to the author that you have. Sometimes though, it can be helpful to include the page number. We'll look at some examples like that, but you don't need to worry about that so much for online articles. So again, this would be fine, giving credit. You could keep it like that. Another way that you could offer credit through in-text citations is by just having the information to start and then in parentheses putting the author's last name at the end of the sentence. Note that the period or whatever punctuation you're ending your sentence with goes on the outside of the parentheses. You really want to make it clear that this author matches this information, right? They're all contained in the same sentence together. If you are referring to a book and you can find the page number where the information is located, you would also need to add that. So in addition to the author's last name, you would also put the page number there. Or you can do kind of a combination of the two. You can refer to the author's last name in your sentence, and then at the end, because you've already said their last name, you don't need to put it in parentheses, you would just put the page number. Okay. Sorry, didn't mean to move forward that fast. So those are all the different ways that you can reference your material. Please let me know if you have questions about this. It is super critical to make sure that you are not accused of plagiarism, that you are consistently offering citations and making it clear where you got your information from. From there, you should be ready to edit. Not too many tips here. A lot of you are familiar with strong editing already. Just a reminder that you can send me drafts or partial drafts for review. Helps me out a lot if you let me know what in particular you're worried about. That way I'm giving you feedback that can help you the best. And it's really important that if you get feedback from me or from anybody else, you make changes accordingly. It can be really hard to let go and to change things that we've already written, but it'll make for a stronger paper. And ask if you're unsure what I or somebody else means by our feedback. So whether it's me or a classmate or a friend or somebody at the writing center, if somebody gives you feedback on what to change and you don't know what they're talking about, make sure you get clarification. I recommend while you're editing that you also go back and reread the rubric to make sure that you're hitting the points that you need to. I recommend reading your work out loud. It can be awkward, and especially as our papers get longer, it can be somewhat time consuming, but it is the best way to catch any errors or unclear phrasing. It's really easy for our eyes to pass over the screen and be okay with having the same word written twice in a row, but when you have to say it out loud, it's much easier to catch things like that. And lastly, please take advantage of the English Center. They have great tutoring, they have great feedback. You can join in live with somebody and get feedback, or you can send in your paper and they'll send it back to you with suggestions. It's a great resource. It is free for you. You're already paying for it through your class fees and everything, so do take advantage of that as well. And hopefully after this, you feel good about your citing sources, both through a works cited page and in-text citations, as well as how to edit your work.